My name is Renata Cole. I'm 34 years old, and until this past Christmas, I was the family's designated free labor. Not officially. Nobody ever put it in writing. But everyone in my family understood the unspoken rule the same way you understand not to touch a hot stove. Renata doesn't have kids. Renata doesn't have a real partner tying her down. Renata works from home doing whatever it is she does on the computer. So Renata has time. Renata has room. Renata has money she's clearly not spending on anything important, since she doesn't have a mortgage on a 5-bedroom house or 3 kids in travel soccer. That was the family's math. It had never once occurred to any of them to ask if the math was correct. I grew up the middle child in a family of 5, my older brother Dominic, me, and my younger sister Paige, in a comfortable but unremarkable suburb outside Sacramento. My father, Walter, spent 30 years as a regional manager for an insurance company, the kind of job that pays well enough to buy a boat but not well enough to enjoy it more than 4 times a year. My mother, Denise, didn't work outside the home after Dominic was born, and she ran our household with the exacting precision of someone who believed martyrdom was a personality trait to be admired rather than a warning sign to be addressed. From the time I was maybe 9 years old, I understood that in our family, worth was measured in visible milestones. Dominic got a football scholarship, so Dominic was praised at every Thanksgiving for the rest of his natural life, even though he blew out his knee sophomore year and ended up selling commercial HVAC systems. Paige got married at 24 in a wedding that cost more than my parents' first house, and had 3 kids by 29, so Paige became the family's living proof that they'd raised a real woman, one who understood what mattered. And me? I got a computer science degree nobody understood, moved to Austin for a job nobody could explain to their friends, and never got married, which in my mother's cosmology was somewhere between a personal failure and a quiet embarrassment she had to explain at church. What none of them knew, because I never told them, and because I stopped trying to explain things to people who'd already decided not to listen, was that I hadn't just gotten a job in computers. I'd spent the last 9 years building something. I started as the second technical hire at a fraud detection startup that most people have never heard of because we don't sell to consumers, we sell to banks. By year 4, I was VP of engineering. By year 7, when the company got acquired by a much larger financial services firm, my equity vested into a number that still didn't feel real when I looked at it. I kept working. I liked the work. I liked being good at something my family had no framework to measure. I never told them the number. I told them the company got bought out, it went fine. That was true. It just left out the part where fine meant I could, if I wanted to, never work another day in my life and still be financially secure into my 90s. Why did I hide it? Partly strategy, partly self-protection. I'd watched what happened to Dominic the one time he admitted a good bonus year out loud. Within a month, my parents were just mentioning that the boat needed a new engine. I watched what happened when Paige's husband got a promotion. Suddenly, they were the ones expected to cover the extended family cruise for my parents' 40th anniversary. I did the math early. In my family, disclosed success wasn't celebrated. It was billed.
So I stayed quiet.
I let them believe I was the underachieving middle child who did something with computers, made decent enough money, and had entirely too much free time because I didn't have a husband or kids weighing me down. I let them believe it because the alternative was becoming everyone's emergency fund. Which brings us to this Christmas. For 11 years running, my parents hosted the family Christmas. All of us, plus my Aunt Carol's family, plus a rotating cast of cousins, spouses, and family friends who apparently could not be told no. 22 people, easy most years. My mother loved hosting the way some people love running marathons. She complained about every mile of it and then signed up again the second it was over because the complaining itself was the point. It gave her something to be a martyr about. This year, though, my mother had decided she was done. Her knees hurt. My father had a minor heart scare in the spring. Nothing serious, a stent, he was fine, but it gave my mother the leverage she needed to declare that hosting 22 people for Christmas was, medically speaking, off the table. I found out I'd been voluntold in a family group chat on November 9th. I remember the date because I was in the middle of a product review call, phone face down on the desk, when it started buzzing itself off the table. I want to walk through exactly what happened because the timeline matters. Okay, everyone, big Christmas news. Your dad and I are stepping back this year. Doctor's orders LOL. So, we've decided. Renata is hosting. You have the space, you don't have kids running around, and you have all that flexible work from home time. It'll be so nice for you to finally do something for the family for once. I read that sentence. Finally do something for the family for once. 3 separate times before I fully absorbed it. I have paid for my parents' anniversary trip twice. I quietly covered $1,100 of Paige's wedding florist bill when the vendor threatened to walk 2 days before the event, and nobody but Paige and I ever knew because I asked her not to tell anyone. Not out of secrecy, but because I didn't want to count it as a debt she owed me. I've sent money for car repairs, for a school fundraiser, for Dominic's kids' braces, quietly, without ceremony, because that's what you do for people you love. Finally do something for the family for once. I let that sit for a second. Then I kept scrolling. Dad, also, since your mom and I have been covering the food every year, and this year we're stepping back from hosting duties entirely, we think it makes sense for you to handle the catering too. We got a quote from Bellamy's for the full spread, 22 people, it comes to $9,800. We'll forward you the contact. I actually laughed out loud, alone in my home office, the kind of short disbelieving laugh that has no humor in it at all. $9,800. Not, can you help with some of the cost? Not, can you contribute? A full invoice, forwarded like a work order. Paige, OMG, that's so nice of you, Ren. Let me know what I can bring. Maybe a side dish? A side dish. My sister, mother of 3, married to a man who'd just gotten his second promotion in 18 months, was contributing a side dish. I was being handed a 5-figure catering bill and full hosting duties for 22 people in a house I'd have to prep for a week, with zero conversation about whether I was even available, whether I wanted to, whether this was something I'd agreed to at any point in the last 34 years of my life. Great. I'll send you the guest list and the seating we usually use. You'll figure it out. You're so organized with your work stuff. Not one question mark that wasn't rhetorical. Not one moment where anyone paused to ask if I was free, if I had plans, if this was even something I wanted. It had been decided in the 15 minutes before that message, probably over coffee, the way you decide which contractor to hire for a driveway repair. I sat there for a long moment, and then I did something I want to be very honest about because it's the part of the story people always want to romanticize into something more dramatic than it was. I didn't feel rage. I didn't cry. I felt something quieter and colder than that, the specific, clarifying feeling of finally seeing a pattern you'd been politely refusing to name for years. I typed one word. Noted. Then I put my phone down, finished my work call like a normal human being, and that night, I opened my laptop and looked at a resort in Ubud, Bali, that I'd bookmarked 8 months earlier during a slow week when I was fantasizing about actually using some of my vacation days for once. A private villa with its own plunge pool, a chef on call, a program that included 2 spa days, and a sunrise trek up a volcano I'd wanted to see since I read about it in a magazine on a flight in 2019. I texted the resort concierge directly, because I'd exchanged emails with them before about availability. Following up on my inquiry from earlier this year. I'd like to book the 2-bedroom villa for the week of December 20th through the 27th. Please confirm the reservation and send the invoice. Concierge, wonderful news, Miss Cole. We have that villa available for those exact dates. Total for the week, including the full package, comes to $9,800. I'll send the confirmation and invoice shortly. I stared at that number for a long moment. $9,800. The exact same figure, down to the dollar, as the catering invoice sitting unanswered in my inbox from my father.
I didn't plan that.
I want to be clear about that because when I eventually told this story to my closest friend, Marisol, she assumed I'd engineered the number to make some kind of poetic point. I hadn't. It was simply the going rate for a week at that particular resort during peak season. But when I saw it, something in me went very still and very calm, the way water goes still right before it starts to move in a current you can't see from the surface. They wanted $9,800 for me to fund a holiday I never agreed to host. I was going to spend $9,800 on a holiday I actually wanted. I confirmed the booking that night. Over the next 6 weeks, I let the family chat run its course, without correcting a single assumption. This is the part where I have to admit something that isn't flattering. I let them keep planning around me. I let my mother send the guest list, 68 text messages of instructions about seating arrangements and who couldn't sit next to whom because of a decade-old feud about a Yahtzee game. I let my father forward me the caterer's contact information twice, because apparently once wasn't enough. I let Paige ask me 3 separate times what side dish she should bring, as though the side dish were the load-bearing question in this entire arrangement. I never once said I would do it. If you go back and read that chat thread today, and I have more than once, you will not find a single message from me that says, yes, I'll host, I'll pay for it, or anything resembling consent. What you will find is a family that had decided, collectively and without discussion, that my silence meant agreement, because that's what my silence had always meant before. For 34 years, my quiet was their green light. This year, my quiet meant something else. It meant I was already gone. I never sent that history to anyone. I never brought it up in the group chat, never used it as ammunition because that was never the point. I didn't need my family to agree they'd used me. I just needed to stop being available to be used, and the two things, it turns out, don't require each other at all. I did do a few things during those 6 weeks, quietly, the way I do most things. I called Bellamy's Catering directly, the company my father had contracted, and let them know, politely, professionally, the way you'd handle a vendor conversation in any business context, because that's exactly what this was, that I would not be the one paying the invoice, and that whoever had signed the contract should confirm payment arrangements with them directly before the event. I have that call logged. I have the confirmation email. I wanted a clean paper trail, not because I intended to use it as a weapon, but because I've learned, professionally and personally, that ambiguity is how people avoid accountability, and I wasn't in the mood to be the one holding the bag for someone else's unpaid invoice. I also, quietly, called my Aunt Carol, my mother's younger sister, the one person in the extended family who has always treated me like a full adult rather than a resource to be allocated, and told her the truth. Not to recruit her onto my side, not to build a case, but because I genuinely like her and didn't want her showing up to an empty house on Christmas Eve with her kids in the car. They what? She said, when I explained it. Voluntold me. Full hosting, full catering, $9,800, no conversation. There was a long pause on the line. And you're not doing it? I'm not doing it. Good, Carol said, with a flatness that told me she'd been waiting a long time for somebody in this family to say no to Denise. I'll figure out my own plans. Where are you actually going to be? Bali. She laughed, a real laugh, surprised and a little delighted. Good for you, Ren. Truly. That was the only conversation I had with anyone in the family before Christmas Eve. Everyone else operated under the assumption that had been said in November and never revisited. Renata's hosting. Renata's got it handled. Renata always gets it handled. I spent part of that 6 weeks doing something I hadn't done before. I went back through old messages, old emails, 3 years of family group chats, just to see the pattern in writing instead of trusting my memory of it. It wasn't hard to find. There was the year I happened to be free, to drive 4 hours to help Paige move apartments the week before a huge product launch at work, because nobody thought to ask if that timing worked for me. There was the Easter I spent making place cards and centerpieces because my mother had just assumed I'd want to since I was so crafty. A skill I don't actually have and have never claimed to have. There was the time, 2 Christmases before this one, when I'd quietly paid the difference on my parents' anniversary cruise upgrade because my mother had mentioned, within my earshot and nobody else's, that the balcony rooms were just a little out of reach this year, and I'd transferred the money the next morning without being asked, because that's who I'd always been in this family, the one who filled in the gap nobody else noticed or was willing to fill. Reading it all back to back in one sitting was clarifying in a way that just living through it, one incident at a time, had never been. Each individual ask had always seemed reasonable enough on its own. It was only in aggregate that the shape of it became obvious. I wasn't a daughter who occasionally helped out. I was infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't get asked if it wants to be used. It just gets used on the assumption that it will hold. I flew out on December 18th, 2 days ahead of my reservation, because I wanted a buffer in Denpasar before heading up to Ubud, and because, if I'm honest, I wanted distance from my phone while the last of the group chat noise happened without me. I turned off notifications for the family thread on the 17th. Not blocked, not left, just muted, the way you'd mute a television playing a show you've already seen the ending of. The villa was exactly what the photos promised, and then somehow more. A private plunge pool that caught the afternoon light in a way that made the water look lit from underneath. A chef named Wei-Yin, who made a rendang on my first night that I still think about. Rice terraces visible from the upstairs balcony, impossibly green, stepping down toward a river I could hear, but not see. I spent my first full day doing absolutely nothing, which is a skill I'd apparently never developed, because it took real effort to sit by that pool with a book I didn't read a single page of and not feel like I was supposed to be doing something for somebody else. On the 23rd, I did a sunrise trek up Mount Batter with a guide named Katut, who didn't ask me anything about my job, my marital status, or my family, and it was the most peaceful 3 hours I'd had in longer than I wanted to admit. Standing at the top as the sun came up over the caldera, I genuinely did not think about Christmas at all. I thought about the fact that I was 34 years old, and this was the first vacation I'd taken in 4 years that wasn't a long weekend squeezed between work obligations, and that the version of me who'd have felt guilty about that, the version who would have been checking her phone every 20 minutes to make sure nobody needed anything, seemed for the first time like a person I used to be rather than a person I currently was. I turned my phone back on that afternoon, mostly out of curiosity, and found 4 missed calls from my mother, 7 from my father, and a family chat that had, in my absence, become something between a group panic and a group trial. I didn't respond to any of it. I wanted one more day. Christmas Eve, Bali time. I was having dinner on the villa terrace when my phone rang. It was 11 p.m. back home, which meant it was Christmas Eve there too, and everyone was, presumably, exactly where they'd expected to be all along. At my parents' house, in the driveway, on the porch, somewhere, waiting for a host who did not exist. I let it ring twice before I picked up. Renata. My mother's voice had the particular pitch it gets when she is trying to sound calm and failing completely.
Where are you?
I'm in Bali, I said. It's Christmas Day here already, actually. Merry Christmas, Mom. There was a silence on the other end that had actual weight to it. I could hear, faintly, the sound of a house full of people, voices, someone's kid crying, the specific clatter of people standing around in a kitchen that has no food in it. Everyone's here, my mother said, and her voice had climbed another half octave. Everyone is here, Renata. 22 people are standing in my living room. There is no food. There is no. Where's the catering? Bellamy's said they never got paid. They said someone called and canceled the payment arrangement. I called them to let them know I wasn't paying the invoice, I said, evenly, since I never agreed to pay it. You hosted Christmas. You were supposed to. I never agreed to host Christmas, I said. You announced it. In a group chat. You didn't ask me.
You told me.
And then you sent me a $9,800 invoice for catering I never agreed to buy, for a party I never agreed to throw, in my own house that nobody asked to use. You said noted. You said you understood. I said noted. I agreed. I noted what you decided. I never said I'd do it. My father's voice came through now, distant but audible, my mother clearly not covering the phone. What is she saying? Is she coming? Tell her people drove 2 hours. Renata, my mother said, and I could hear her voice shift into the register she uses when she wants something rather than when she's angry. The wheedling, wounded tone that had worked on me for 3 decades. Please. This isn't funny. People are hungry. Your father's blood pressure. He's already stressed about his heart, and now this. I want to be honest, that line almost worked. It's the line that has always worked my whole life. Some vague invocation of my father's health, deployed at the exact moment it would be most useful, regardless of whether it had anything to do with the actual situation. But I'd had 8 days of quiet and rice terraces and a sunrise on a volcano, and for the first time in my adult life, I had enough distance to hear the mechanism clicking into place as it happened, rather than after. Dad's heart is fine, I said. He had a stent in March, and he's been cleared for normal activity since June. You know that. I know that. Using it right now doesn't change what happened here, which is that you decided, without asking me, that I'd host and pay for a $9,800 party, and you told everyone else it was handled before you ever told me. So, what are we supposed to do? She snapped, the wheedling gone as fast as it had come, the mask never staying on for long once it stopped working. There's 22 people in my living room with no dinner. I don't know, Mom, I said. I'd suggest ordering something. There's a lot of good pizza places open even on Christmas Eve, I'd imagine. Or Dominic could cook, he's got that big kitchen. Or Paige, since she offered a side dish, could maybe scale that up. This is unbelievable. After everything we've done for you. Enjoy the catering, I said, and I hung up. I want to tell you I felt a rush of triumph in that moment, something cinematic. What I actually felt was quieter, a kind of settling, like a piece of furniture finally sitting flush against a wall after years of being propped at a slight angle. I put my phone face down on the table and looked out at the rice terraces going dark, the fireflies starting to come up out of the grass, and I finished my dinner. My phone rang again 4 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again, 14 times over the next 2 hours, according to the call log I still have saved. I didn't answer a single one. I found out what actually happened at the house that night through Aunt Carol, who called me the next morning, Christmas morning her time, evening mine, to check in and ended up giving me the full account. Apparently, after I hung up, my mother had tried calling 3 more family members to see if anyone could fix the situation, meaning, could anyone else produce $9,800 and a catered dinner for 22 people with roughly 2 hours' notice on Christmas Eve. Nobody could, obviously, because that's not a thing that exists. My brother Dominic, to his credit, drove to a grocery store that was somehow still open and came back with rotisserie chickens, bags of pre-made sides, and enough bread to feed the room, which became, by all accounts, the actual Christmas dinner. Rotisserie chicken and grocery store mac and cheese, eaten off my parents' good china because the good china was already out and there was nothing else to do with it. Paige's side dish, a green bean casserole, in the end, became, unexpectedly, the most praised item on the table, which Carol told me with something close to glee. My father, according to Carol, spent most of the evening not saying much, which for him was its own kind of statement. My mother spent it alternating between telling anyone who'd listen that I had abandoned the family and disappearing into the kitchen to make more increasingly frantic phone calls, none of which were answered, because it was 11 p.m. on Christmas Eve and nobody else's plans were more flexible than mine had apparently been assumed to be. It was honestly kind of a mess, Carol said, but not the disaster your mother's making it out to be. Everyone ate. Everyone had a fine time, actually, once your mom stopped storming around. Dominic's chicken was better than I expected.
But run, she paused.
Your mom is telling everyone you humiliated the family, that you abandoned Christmas. I didn't abandon anything, I said. I went on a trip I paid for, with my own money, because nobody asked me if I wanted to spend my Christmas cooking and paying for a party for 22 people. I know that, Carol said. I'm just telling you what's being said. The fallout lasted longer than I expected, though maybe I should have expected exactly this, given the family I come from. My mother didn't speak to me for the first 10 days of January. When she finally called, it wasn't an apology, it was an attempt to renegotiate the story, to find some version of events where I still owed something. You could have at least told us you weren't coming, she said, instead of just disappearing. I told you in November I'd noted what you decided, I said. I never confirmed I'd do it. You told everyone else it was handled without checking with me first. That's not my failure to communicate, Mom. That's yours. We just assumed because you always... I know what you always assumed, I said. That's the whole problem. There was a long silence and then quieter. So what happens now? Are you not doing family things anymore? I thought about that question for longer than she probably expected me to, because it was underneath the accusation, an actually honest question, maybe the first honest question anyone in my family had asked me in years. I'll still come to things, I said. I'll still help when I'm asked and when I actually want to. What I won't do anymore is get informed of my own volunteering after the fact, like I'm a resource that gets allocated instead of a person who gets asked. That's not what we... It's exactly what happened, Mom. Look at the messages. Nobody asked me a single question with a real question mark in it. You told me the guest list. You told me the seating chart. You told me the catering bill. At no point did anyone say, Renata, would you be willing to host Christmas this year? And if so, can we talk about the budget together? You decided, and you told me, and you expected me to fall in line the way I always have. She didn't have an answer for that. I don't think she'd ever actually looked at it laid out that plainly before, because looking at it plainly required admitting something about how the family had used me for the better part of 2 decades, and my mother has never been especially good at admitting things. Here's what actually changed in the months since. I did go to Easter at my parents' house because I wanted to and because Aunt Carol asked me to come, and I like Aunt Carol. I brought a dish. I helped clean up. Nobody asked me to host, and nobody asked me to pay for anything, and I noticed, I think for the first time in my adult life, that I actually enjoyed being there, instead of performing enjoyment while doing math about what this visit was costing me in time or money, or both. Paige and I have gotten closer, actually, in a way I didn't expect. She called me in February, a little sheepish, to say she'd gone back and reread the whole group chat from November and felt bad that she'd just offered a side dish, without ever asking if I was even okay with hosting in the first place. I didn't even think about it, she admitted. I just assumed, because that's how it's always been. I told her I appreciated her saying that, and I meant it. It was the only real acknowledgement I got from anyone in my family, and it came from the sister I'd always assumed was the least likely to notice. Dominic, and I haven't really discussed it directly, but he did text me a photo from Christmas night. The table full of rotisserie chicken and mismatched sides on my parents' good china, with the caption, "Best Christmas dinner we've had in years TBH no notes," which I took, correctly I think, as his version of solidarity. My father, in his own quiet way, called me in March, ostensibly about something unrelated, and near the end of the call said, almost as an aside, "Your mother handled that Christmas thing badly." I told her that. It wasn't an apology exactly. My father has never apologized for anything directly in his life, but for him, it was as close as it gets, and I took it. My mother and I are still working it out. She stopped bringing it up as an accusation mostly, though every few months she'll make a comment about how some people just don't understand family, and I've learned not to take the bait. What's changed, concretely, is that nobody has assumed anything about my time, my money, or my availability since. When Thanksgiving planning started this year, my mother actually texted me directly, "Would you be able to host this year? No pressure if not, just checking before we plan around it." A question. An actual question, with an actual question mark, and room in it for me to say no. I said yes, actually. I hosted Thanksgiving. I chose to. I split the cost with everyone contributing something, the way a family dinner is supposed to work, and it was genuinely one of the nicer Thanksgivings we've had. The difference between that and the Christmas before, it isn't really about the money, even though the money is what everyone fixates on when I tell this story. It's about the difference between being asked and being informed. For 34 years, I let my family inform me of my own life and call it inclusion. It took a $9,800 invoice and a villa in Bali with the exact same price tag for me to finally understand the difference, and to understand that I'd had the ability to say no this entire time. I just never used it. I still have the photo from the top of Mount Batter, taken right as the sun cleared the ridge, the whole caldera lit up gold and quiet below me. I look at it sometimes when I need reminding of what it felt like to be somewhere I chose to be, doing something I chose to do, answering to no one's invoice but my own. That's the whole story. My family got rotisserie chicken on the good china, and I got a sunrise over a volcano. I think, honestly, we both ended up exactly where we needed to be. It just took 22 people standing in an empty kitchen for anyone besides me to finally understand that.